Hello, 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 and good evening, ladies. Welcome to our fourth show. We're very excited. This is our fourth show hosting our ladies event. Thank you so very much for tuning in month after month. We really love doing these sessions with you. I'm just sharing some information on how we can basically be better as people, particularly as women. So tonight I'm very, very excited about the show. So I want to go ahead and get started. If you don't know, I'm Dr. Latanya Hughes. This is our fourth show, our fourth episode of Ladies. And so just thank you so much for tuning in with us on tonight. I don't think tonight's show is going to be very long, but it's going to be very informative and full of a lot of, some information about relationship killers. This was our first episode, and we're revisiting it for part two because there was so much information and there's so much. I mean, we just barely scratched the surface on that topic. So we thought we'd come back and revisit it again. And we're probably going to have a third and probably fourth, even fifth session because there's so much going on that affects relationships that we just really need to dig deeper into them. But before we get into tonight's topic, revisiting relationship killers, let me introduce our host organization, which is Magnificent International Incorporated. It is a nonprofit organization, and it is actually designated as a 501c3 organization by the Internal Revenue Service of the United States of America. Again, I'm Dr. Latanya Hughes. I'm the founder and visionary for Magnificent. Our mission is to systematically transform global communities by equipping citizens with life skills, basically that will uplift them and their communities. We do this by motivating authentic citizens to be genuine, noble, and full of integrity while learning financial responsibility to be independent and compassionate, living in excellence while navigating life's trials. Sounds like a mouthful, but it's very important. And that's why everybody's going to be magnificent as a result of participating in our programs and tuning in. And this particular program is geared towards, you guessed it, women. So let's get into tonight's topic. Again, we're revisiting our very first show. Relationship Killers remains our highest viewed show to date. So we thought we'd expand that discussion tonight. Many times our relationships end up in the relationship graveyard because we're too busy worrying about what everyone else is doing and trying to keep up with them. That's right. We are so caught up in keeping up with the Joneses that we're ignoring and, dare I say, sabotaging our own relationships. So tonight, I'm going to dig in really deep into this topic tonight. I'm flying solo, but hey, we gonna make it happen. We're gonna get into this topic, but first, let me recap our first episode for those of you who didn't have a chance to tune in live, or if you haven't watched on our YouTube channel. Let me recap for you some pretty important things that we talked about in the first show. In our first show, we addressed the issue of relationship killers from both an internal and an external point of view. Internally, our relationships are toxic as a result of our emotions and what John Gottman calls the Four Horsemen, which is criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. And externally, we learned that relationships become toxic as a result of family and friends, finances, and the media. So let me talk a little bit quickly, briefly about Mr. Gottlieb's, or excuse me, Gottman's, um, what do you say, his 4 points, his four issues of, relationships particularly. And if you don't know, I mean, John Gottman, he's a relationship counselor. He coaches people in their relationships, particularly marriages. And it was just really exciting and in just very fascinating information. He did some research on relationships and primarily marriages, but his four indicators, he called them the Four Horsemen, like I said before, because he calls marriage an apocalypse. I don't know why, but that's what he does. So when it comes to criticism, he says that criticism is global. It attacks the person and not their behavior. Um, there's nothing wrong with complaining, but the people we are in fellowship and relationship with are not our garbage cans. So they are not there to be our dumping ground. So we have to know when to draw the line between complaining and criticism. His next point was on defensiveness. And he says, when we are defensive, we are really blaming the other person, which is really true if we think about it. The issue is more about us and not about them. The problem is when we're defensive, it makes things worse. It just escalates the situation. So, what we have to do is get to the root of what's going on, but more importantly, get to the root of why we really are being defensive. His third point was stonewalling, which is when we are completely disengaged. We have tuned out. We have completely checked out. We're somewhere else, and this causes the other person or even people in the relationship to do the same thing. They're going to check out too. So it's an endless cycle. And the last thing is contempt. Now, contempt is really often at the heart of a lot of the relationship turmoil that we experience. And what we have to do is figure out why we feel the way we feel. Um, the one thing about contempt is that it's very poisonous. It makes the other person or the other people in the relationship feel like, you're disgusted with them. So that's something that we don't want. But that's all of the internal factors. But today we're going to be focusing on external factors. And one of the biggest external factors in relationship killers is other people. And let's be honest, as much as we want people to be in our corner, they're just not. The other thing is sometimes we have too many people in our business, in our relationships that don't need to be there. And their opinions, their thoughts, their views are really overriding, the people that we're in relationships with. And tonight we're really going to be focusing on personal relationships, intimate relationships. Our first episode really covered both intimate and platonic relationships. But tonight we're really talking about intimate relationships, those, husband and wife marriages, those kind of relationships, because for one, am tired of seeing a lot of relationships, healthy relationships, end up in the relationship graveyard. And there's something that we have to be willing to deal with. And from the, from the standpoint is sometimes and more often than not, we need to take an internal look at why these things are happening. So that's a brief recap of the first episode and tonight, and why we're going to be digging into this topic again on tonight, particularly from an external factor point of view. Internally, those, I think sometimes the external factors are a result of internal factors. We have to look at why we're so interested in other people's opinions, or in this case of what we're talking about tonight, keeping up with the Joneses. So last month, our show was on keeping up with the Joneses, and it was so very insightful. Miss Ganae Thompson, she's an author, and she shared with us her testimony and tips from her book Taming the Want Impulse, and how keeping up with the Joneses was very toxic to her finances. And tonight we're going to see how it can be toxic to our relationships. And first of all, one of the things we really need to pay attention to when we're trying to keep up with the Joneses is, can we afford to do that? All relationships are not created equal. I know we want to believe that they are, but all relationships are not created equal. So, what we have to do is remember that we're all unique. Everyone, we're not all meant to have a husband or wife and, the whole quote American dream of 2.5 kids and a dog. That's not for everybody. Some people are meant to be two people household, husband and wife. Might just be you. You may not be meant to be married, may not be meant to be in an intimate relationship because you got issues, or you just not the kind of person who wants to get married. I have a colleague, someone I went to school with, and I talked to her recently, and she was like, I don't know why I got married. I never wanted to get married. And okay. So, but sometimes we get pushed into things because that's what people think we're supposed to do, or that's what people say we're supposed to do, particularly as women. And I just want to encourage you that if you're in a relationship, to satisfy other people, or just because that's what you're supposed to do, don't do that. Don't do that, because you're hurting the other person just as much as you're hurting yourself. They're just as miserable, because it's like they're like baggage for you. A relationship is not meant to be baggage. It's supposed to be good, healthy, fun, exciting. It's supposed to be a lot of different things, but it's not a to-do list. That's something I really want to stress to us, particularly as women, because we have things drilled in our mind that you get when you grow up, you get married, you have kids, you do this and you that, do that. But that's not what all women want to do. Some people don't want that whole fairy tale of the knight in shining armor and I'm going to have my house and all this. Everybody doesn't want that. And if that is you as a woman, you have to be okay with that. And I'm here to tell you, be okay with the fact that if you don't want to get married, and you don't want to have a house with a dog and kids and all of that, you don't have to. Be you. Be uniquely you, whatever that is, in whatever context. Because if you keep doing what other people want you to do or what society thinks you should be doing, you're going to be a statistic, and you're going to have a whole field of relationships in a graveyard that a lot of stuff could have been avoided, because there's a lot of pain and hurt and a lot of things associated with relationships going in that graveyard. And every time you bury a relationship, you bury a part of yourself. So think about that for a moment. But one of the things we're going to talk about tonight, the first thing is pitfalls of keeping up with the Joneses, because that's just, it's really, really important that we understand that, first of all, why do we think that we need to keep up with what everybody else is doing? And I dare say it's because we think we're comparing ourselves. Again, all relationships are not created equal. All people are not the same. We really have to get to the root of why we feel like we need to compare ourselves, our relationships, our lives to what other people are doing. So, growing up, we always talk about, I always heard about, oh, so and so trying to keep up with the Joneses. They trying to keep up with this person. And they trying to keep up with that person. And this, and that. And that's a lot of stress and anxiety. And it's too much. Why put that kind of pressure on your relationship? So think about it. If you and your spouse, your significant other, okay, if between the two of you, you make $100,000 a year, and you're in New York, Miami, LA, you're somewhere where cost of living is not the same as in a Carolina or Iowa or, you know, Arkansas or Indiana, somewhere South Carolina, where $100,000 will go a pretty good bit, but it's not, you know, it's you don't always have breathing room with that in some bigger places. So let's say you're in one of those places, and you see that some of your friends, they doing it up. They're going out all the time. They're taking cruises and they're doing this and they're doing that. And you feel like you're stuck in your relationship and you're bored because you don't do all those things. But what you don't know is you don't know if they're doing all those things and really don't have the money to do it. You don't know if they're doing it and they do have the money to do it and they're not really thinking about you, because they don't know that you're in competition with them, or that you're on the outside looking in. And that's one of the things about keeping up with the Joneses, that it will have you in financial ruin. Not only will it have you in financial ruin, it will have your relationships in a graveyard, because you're going to be arguing about finances. And in our last episode, one of the things that we talked about was finances, and how finances, the economy, really, really, really affects relationships. Divorce rates over the years have been increasing, increasing, increasing. And it's almost increasing in proportion with the economy. It's just, and it's not just here in the United States. Things have taken a turn for the worse. So, people I don't know what happened, but I think my connection got bad. But one of the things you don't want to do is add pressure. You don't want to add unnecessary pressure to your relationship, by saying, hey, I want to go out and do this and do this and do this and this and this and this, when you already know finances are tight. So if finances are already tight, trying to keep up with what your friends are doing or what your neighbors are doing is not going to help. Just because your neighbor got a new car doesn't mean you need to get a new car. Just because your friends can get a new car every 2 to 3 years doesn't mean you can. You don't know if they're leasing that car, or you don't know what their credit score is like. You can't compare your life and your relationship to the next person. And that essentially is what we do when we focus on keeping up with what everybody else is doing. The other thing that we have to be careful on when it comes to keeping up with the Joneses is minding our own business. We're nosy. Our nose is always in other folks' stuff. That's a problem. Here's the thing about being concerned with what other folks are doing. It's not healthy. When you focus so much on keeping up with what other people are doing, that means you're not focusing on your own relationships. And that's really not good. Because if you're spending more time focusing on what everybody else is doing and trying to figure out how you can get your relationship to where they are, it's like you feel like they've raised the bar. So now you've got to live up to that standard. But who said that was the case? And who said that was the case for your relationship? Remember, all relationships are not created equal. So if you are focusing on what other people are doing, again, that's not a good thing. That's a problem. You want to make sure that you're not, building your life on what other people are doing. Um, Here's the thing um about keeping up with what other people doing, and there are some signs. There are some telltale signs that um you're a busybody, that you're too busy in other people's stuff. And so I found this very interesting list, and I have to agree with it. If any of these fit your bill, you're spending too much time in other folks' business, and that's going to lead you and your relationship into a great relationship graveyard. These things are very toxic. So, um, if the only thing that you ever talk about is other people, this person relationship, that person, and what everybody else is doing in their relationship, you have a problem. You're so busy focusing on what everybody else is doing, you're not addressing your own affairs, things that are happening in your own relationship, because you're vested. All of your time is spent worrying about other people's stuff and what other people are doing. That is a problem. You're going to have a problem because you're neglecting your own relationship, trying to figure out what everybody else is doing. For whatever reason, you feel like that's your business when it's not. You have a problem. If you frequently are told to mind your own business, whether it's by the person you're in a relationship with or other people, you probably are getting involved in other people's business a little bit too much. If you give advice without being asked, if people become codependent upon you to solve their problems, if you overthink and obsess about situations that don't involve you, aka you worried about so and so relationship and how they gonna make it and why they did this and why they did that, that's a problem. You're stressing yourself about somebody else's business and you're not even spending that much time in your own. That's a problem. If you get upset on behalf of other people, you going off on a tirade because I can't believe so and so did that to her, and I can't believe he did that to her, and she did that to him, and da 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 da. You got a problem. You have a problem. You get upset when people don't handle situations how you want them to. I can't believe they did that. I told them that, or I would have did this and da 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 da. or you are always keeping tabs on what other folks are doing, whether it's by social media or if you're that person peeking through the window, you're the neighbor always looking, or you're the one in the office always got to know what everybody's doing, what's happening in everybody relationships. Like you feel like you're the fix it. You're the fixer. You're the person that everybody should be coming to for whatever reason. You have a problem. You have a problem because you're too busy worried about what everybody else is doing and what's happening with them, that you're killing your own relationship. You're not spending time in your relationship. You're nurturing somebody else's business, but you're not nurturing your own relationship. And that's got to stop. So then you have to really ask yourself, why am I like this? Why am I doing these things? What's causing me to really be caught up and compare my life and my relationships to other people, or to get so involved in other people's business that I don't know what to do? Could it be there's an emptiness and a void that you just really feel like you need to be used, you need to be needed and wanted, but why not nurture your relationship and get all of that what you need? Or could it be you shouldn't be in a relationship? Could it be, could it be you grew up with this type of behavior? And we often are a product of, what has happened before us. So a lot of times we'll have we'll have expectations of things, and we assume that everybody's okay with that, or that everybody that's normal. Here's the thing about when you get into a relationship, or when you start talking about getting a relationship, even in the pre-relationship stage, the courting stage. These are some things, some questions that you need to ask, because you got to find out if the person that you're potentially wanting to be in a relationship with has a problem being nosy, or if you have a problem being nosy, and if they're okay with that. Because if they're okay with that, that's fine. Remember, our relationships are not created equal. But what you want to do is ask. You need to find out, what are some telltale signs? Are they always in this phone? Always got to check social media. I got to see, I got to see, I got to see. Are they trolling people's internet pages? What do they talk about the most? Are they gossipy? Are they always wondering, I got to find out what happened with so and so and so and so? Is their life like a soap opera? Do they like drama? Are you like that? Because I'm not trying to be funny, ladies. Don't think that men are not like that too, because there are some. But, again, all relationships are not created equal. Now, am I saying that when it comes to your relationships, not to have spend time away from your significant other? No, because that's absolutely healthy. You have to have a life aside from that person. Of course, you need boundaries, but you do need to be your own person. I know some people who are in relationships, they're in marriages, they're miserable because they don't have an identity aside from that marriage, that relationship. That's not healthy. They're miserable. And so you've got to find a life and have something aside from that. But what we need to be doing is really getting to the root of why we are the way we are. We are a product of our environment. So if you came around, if you grew up in a time or in a household or in a family, or, at some point in your life around people who that's all they did, and that was normal for them, it's going to take some time and probably some professional counseling and help to get out of that, because it's a learned behavior, and anything that's a learned behavior can be unlearned. It's going to take work. And in our first episode, remember I said, when it comes to keeping our relationships out of the relationship graveyard, we have to be willing to do the work and put in the work. And what does that mean? Go to counseling, you know talk to people, talk it out. It doesn't matter. See, your relationship is your business. It's the problem is a lot of times we're trying to keep up with other people. We're trying to keep up a facade, but why do we need a facade? Why do we need to keep up an image to make people think something that's not true? That's a lot of work. That's a lot of stress, and it can have adverse effects not only on your relationship but also on your health. So again, you have to ask yourself, who are you in competition with? And why do you feel like you need to be in competition with these people? Think about the Jeffersons back in the day, that television show, the Jeffersons, and in the opening credit, and where we're moving on up to the east side to the deluxe apartment in the sky. That's a good thing. But if you're constantly trying to keep up with what everybody else is doing, you're going to struggle while you're in that deluxe apartment in the sky on the Upper East Side. So if you can't afford it, then maybe you shouldn't be there. What am I saying? If you can't afford to do what the Joneses are doing, you can't be doing it. Don't do it. Matter of fact, keep your eyes off the Joneses. Keep your ears and your mouth off the Joneses, because the Joneses will have you in financial ruin, and they will have your relationships in a relationship graveyard. Then, what it'll also do, it'll give you a reputation for being someone who doesn't know how to mind their own business, but also doesn't know what it's like to have a healthy relationship, because they're always trying to keep up with the latest and the greatest, and that's not good. Who wants to be in a relationship with someone who's never satisfied? Because that's what it is. You're not satisfied with what you have. So if you're not satisfied with what you have, what does that say to the other person? How do you think that actually makes the other person feel when it's always got to be something better? As if what they're offering isn't good enough to begin with. Or could it be you're keeping up with them because you want to find out how to position yourself for the next best thing, because what you got is all right, but it's a stepping stone to something else? Don't be in a relationship, because you're going to hurt somebody else. And those seeds that you sow will come back. Trust me. People call it karma, you call it whatever you want, but if you're just using people as stepping stones to get to somebody else bigger and to get to the next grand thing, you're going to completely exhaust yourself and every possibility you have. There's 7 billion people on this planet and counting. But trust me, all it takes is a reputation for your character to build to the point that you have a reputation that precedes you, that people don't want to be involved with you, that they avoid you like the plague, because they know that you are a serial relationship killer. That's what we want to avoid, ladies. We don't want to be serial relationship killers. Rather, we want to be women who have healthy relationships. We don't want to be toxic. We want to be the person that people come to as a model to say, how do you do it? How do you walk away, or how do you address this, or how do you address that? But what we don't want to do is be serial relationship killers, people who just make a practice of just terminating relationships, or bad behaviors that cause their relationships to end up in a relationship graveyard. Stop killing your relationships. And a big part of it is not minding our own business. It's very hard to do, but I'm always reminded this, and I think I've said this in one of the shows before, was relationships are like running a race. Horses have blinders on. They depend on the jockey. Or sometimes even the jockey, they got that helmet down, they got whatever, but they're focused. You have to have laser focus in your own relationship. You can't be worrying about what Sally and Tom doing, and what Tina and Sharon doing, and this one and that one. You can't be worried about what everybody else is doing. Every Tom, Dick, Harry, Jane, Mary Sue don't have a great relationship. They have what they want you to believe they have. Remember, the thing about keeping up with the Joneses is you're on the outside looking in. You're looking at a facade most of the time. Now, there are some people who are very transparent, and what you see is what you get. But more often than not, those folks are not struggling on purpose. If they're struggling, they're making sacrifices to make it so they can enjoy certain things. But they're not they're not going into a hole or a pit intentionally. They're trying to build something. That's what relationships are about. Building something with someone that you care about, that you want something over the long term, that's permanent, until death do you part. If that's what you want, if that's not what you genuinely want, you really need to reevaluate why you are in a relationship. Now, I'm not talking about platonic relationships. Now, platonic relationships are a little bit different. You also got to be careful with keeping up with the Joneses in your platonic relationships, meaning just your regular girlfriends, chum it up, boy pals, girl pals, hey, boom, pow. Okay, you still can't keep up with what they're doing. We learned from last month with Arthur Thompson that, some of her relationships weren't healthy because she saw what they were doing, and it pushed her and it made her just kind of feel like she had to go shopping and do more and do more and do more. She didn't have her own boundaries set to where she had to stop. And so eventually it wasn't because of them, but she realized that within herself, there were some things that she had to do to establish some boundaries so she can get out of that. Sometimes people are doing their own thing. They don't know we're trying to keep up with them, and they really don't care because they're not in comparison. They're not comparing their lives to us. They're out chasing their dreams, which is what we should be doing. We should be minding, we shouldn't be nosy. We should be minding our own business, laser focused on what's best for us. You know, all friendships are not created equal. For instance, you may have a friend over here that's right brain and this one is left brain, but they're equal. They're really good friends to you, but how they express that friendship is completely different. But if you feel like you're in competition with this one and that one, that's a problem. Or if you're in the middle and this one feels like they're in competition with that one and it's pressing you to try to keep up with both of them, you're now stretched thin. And now you're like a rubber band. A rubber band can only be stretched to a certain point before it pops. And what pops? Have you ever popped yourself with a rubber band when that thing went to dying? It stings. It hurts. There's a little bit of pain with that pressure. Eventually, it does go away with a little soothing, with a little bit of time. But if you had just paid attention to that little tear, if you had paid attention to that wear and tear, if you had paid attention to see that that band-aid was about to break, it had reached its tipping point. You could have avoided by just leaving it alone. Let me get another band-aid, or let me get another rubber band. Let me try something different. Let me put this away. Let me throw it in the trash and stop trying to use it. And that's sometimes what we do. We try to keep up with so much for so long that we stretch ourselves so thin that eventually we break, and our relationships break, our finances break, our character breaks, our reputation breaks, because now we've created a consistent pattern of behavior that's toxic, that people don't want to engage with. So we've got to get to the root and start realizing that we are not in competition with other people. What's for us is for us. And some of us need to mature to a certain point that says, okay, you know what? I've reached a certain level of maturity, because that's where we are. We're all at different levels of maturity, even in our relationships. We grow. Relationships grow. They don't stay the same. If they do, something is wrong. The whole point of relationships is it's an evolution. Your relationship at 20 is not going to be the same as your relationship at 30. Why? Because the 30-year-old you is not the same as the 20-year-old you. If it is, there's something wrong. Again, I'm going to go back to my example. I think I used this in our first one. Maybe I didn't. It's in one of those episodes. Go back and watch all of them. They're all good. But remember, I talked about a baby and how, babies don't come out full grown. Well, let's talk about a baby who, okay, babies grow. They don't stay infants. They keep growing. But what happens if we start seeing a baby at 10, but they're still being breastfed? There's something wrong with that. There's an abnormal, there's something that happened that didn't click in that mother's mind that she need to stop. That, first of all, I can't even imagine how painful that is. But who breastfeeds for 10 years? There's an evolution that has to happen in order for that child to grow healthy and strong, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, socially. Same principle applies. If you're 30 and you're still acting and thinking like you're 20, people are going to wonder what's going to happen to you when you hit 40. Because if you're 40 and you're still like you're 20, if you're 50 and you're still like you're 20, it's like that dude in the, it's like the old, the sugar daddies in the club. It's like, you need to stop it. Why are you still in the club? There's something wrong with this. There's something that somebody missed along the way. We have to take ownership and be held accountable for our actions and our decisions, and the things that we do when it comes to our relationships. As much as these external factors do affect our relationships, at the end of the day, it still boils down to what's going on the inside. What's going on up here? What are we thinking? How did that thought life, that process, get into our minds that made us say, I think this is a good thing to do? I need to forsake my relationship so I can be worried about what they're doing, so I can bring my relationship up to where they are. But what if the person that you're with don't even want to be there? What if they don't like doing the things that those people do? What if they don't want that for themselves? What if you want a house with a yard and a garage and all of this stuff, and the person you're with really wants a condo or a townhouse? Or dare I say it, they want to rent an apartment. They just want something small. They don't want all of that. You might want a 19, bedroom mansion with property, like lots of property on a lake. But if the person that you're with only wants a penthouse condo, you have a problem. And somewhere in between there's got to be a compromise. So if in your mind, this is what you want because that's what you were brought up to believe, because somebody along the way kept up with the Joneses, and that tickered down into you. And so now you've got to have this so you can be better than everybody else. Because if you're not better than everybody else, I can't brag. So again, don't get into something and follow something and have something that you don't really want just so somebody else can say, oh, my son did this or my daughter got this. And bragging rights have nothing to do with relationships and should not be involved in your relationships. Because at the end of the day, what are those bragging rights doing for you in your relationship? And in truth, what is it doing for that other person who's doing the bragging? That's more about them and less about you. And what you have to do is, like, who sang the song, Live Your Life, T.I.? You have to live your life. You have to know what's right for you. What do you really want? Again, all relationships are not created equal. And some people don't want to get married. Some people don't want all the children. Some people don't. And some people want kids. They may adopt. They may do in vitro. There's a lot of different options out there these days. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. But if you do want a relationship and you do want to be married, one thing you've got to do is learn to focus on your relationship. Mind your own business, not being what everybody else is doing, neglecting your relationship and what the person in the relationship is saying to you about the things that you're doing. Because I guarantee you, keeping up with the Joneses, if you keep doing it, your relationship is going to be in a graveyard, and you're going to have a whole bunch of it until eventually nobody's going to want to be in a relationship with you, platonic, intimate, or otherwise. You're going to be literally be the person of all lead that when they see you coming, it's like, run. That's not what you want. That's not the reputation that you want. You don't want people to think that way about you when it comes to relationships. You want to be healthy. You don't want to be, oh, that's the toxic chick. You don't want that. You don't want serial relationship killer attached to you. You don't want that. So, just really start thinking about, what do you want? and really kind of chase after that and focus. And if you are a person who really does cannot mind your own business, it's a learned behavior. I want to encourage you to get help, go to counseling, work through it, and figure out why, and so you can start unlearning a lot of that behavior so that you can have healthy, sustainable relationships, so that you can be the model. You can be the person that people look to and say, you know what? I never hear you complain about your relationships. I never hear you talk about da 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 da. You're not, competing with other people. How do you do it? And maybe your testimony can help somebody else figure out, and maybe if you have been someone who used to keep up with the Joneses, and now you're on the other side. You've come out of that successfully. You've got some things that you put into place to help you mind your own business and to focus on nurturing your own relationships. Maybe you're that person too that people can turn to and say, you know what? How can I do the same thing? You overcame it. How can I overcome it? How did you do it? How much time did it take? How much work did it take? Because it's going to be work. But if you're willing to do the work, you can come out on the other side of a toxic relationship as a result of you trying to keep up with the Joneses. I want to encourage you, don't try to keep up with everybody else is doing, because it will exhaust you. That's a job that you're not getting paid for. That on the other end, on the other side of it, may just might lead to all kinds of other ruin for you. Because if that's the case, if you ever want to start a business, or if you have your own business or anything like that, it could possibly do some damage to you in the long run. So I just really want to encourage you to stay out of that relationship graveyard. Keep your relationships out of there by focusing on your own relationships, minding your own business, and not trying to keep up with this person, that person, that person. Because at the end of the day, you're on the outside looking in, and everything that glitter is not gold. And I guarantee you, on the other side of the street is astroturf, or that grass is just as burnt. You just never know. People put on a facade for a reason, because they want people to stay out of their business. Thank you so much for tuning into tonight's show. I'm just really excited that we revisited this very important topic on relationship killers. I think it was a fantastic show. Lots of stuff covered on tonight. If we're honest with ourselves, some of us are serial relationship killers. And I said this in the first episode, and it bears repeating. And I've said this already. Some of our relationships are in the graveyard because of what was established for us as we grew up. It's what we saw, and what we saw is what we became. Or we pushed, somebody pushed for us to have all of these things, not for us, but it was for them. And at the end of the day, it just made us toxic people, because we don't really know how to have healthy relationships, because we don't know anything else. We don't know anything different. For others, it was external influences, like trying to keep up with what everyone else is doing. And again, it's not what you want. All relationships are not created equal, and we are not in competition. This is a fundamental truth that we all, all of us need to accept and come to grips with. We all need a reality check when it comes to our relationships. Otherwise, our relationships will continue to wind up in the relationship graveyard. And that's just something, as women, we don't want. Just trust me. We need girlfriends. If nothing else, if we don't want intimate relationships, we need girlfriends. We need to go out and laugh and talk and shop, even if we're not buying anything. We need that camaraderie, and it's healthy for us as individuals, as people. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. In our next episode, we tackled the age-old question: can women really have it all? I can't wait. Stay connected with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to see what we're doing and get in on the conversations. Until next time, love and light. Good night, and thank you so much for tuning in.